Oh, one more thing. You may want to mute everybody too, just to make
Okay.
sure.
All right. And if you're new to Zoom, you can just press the mute button. Okay. Hold on one second. Let me. All right. I think we're all good. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie, for inviting me to be a part of this today. As you can tell, I've got a little bit of a head cold, and so please bear with my voice doesn't normally sound like I've swallowed a frog. That's just special for today. Yeah, I'm going to just go through. I'm going to share some of my work, my process, my philosophy about art. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If you want, there's a chat function down there. You can write your questions in the chat. I'll see those. Maybe I'll stop in the moment and answer them, or maybe I'll answer them at the end if we have time. Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead and share my screen. Okay. This is a video of my process, and fortunately for all of us, it's sped up a lot, or we would be here for several days. But it'll give you an idea of how I make the work from start to finish. Oh, sorry. We don't want to watch that again. Uh, hopefully that was as mesmerizing to you as it is to me. I painted it, and it's still interesting for me to watch it. Uh, Unfortunately, the paintings don't go quite as quick as it showed in the video. Um, I'm going to give you a brief rundown of where I started and where I've come to, and how my own philosophies about the way I see the world developed. It's one of the earliest drawings that I have an image of from back in high school, and I wouldn't say that I was an incredibly talented kid. I was really untalented at a lot of other things. I had dyslexia in school, undiagnosed, and so reading and writing was incredibly difficult for me. And I was not athletic. And so art was one of those things that I could do and do well. I had the patience for, and I just never stopped. Most little kids draw, paint, and color, and I just never stopped. And over time, my skills got better and better, and the recognition from others came along, and I just continued to pursue it. When I went to undergraduate school, the University of Evansville, I was mostly studying ceramics, and I still teach ceramics at the college. Today's lecture is mostly about my painting work, but while I was at the college, I made these huge self-portraits. The one on the right is about 6 foot by 6 foot. It's a very scary and intimidating painting. Trying to understand myself, understand the world, and painting for me has always been about that, trying to look inside and figure out who I was. And I think that that's really important, especially people in their early 20s trying to figure out their place in the world. And these self-portraits were part of that process for me. As you can tell, I was a pretty sad and serious person in my college years. While I was in school, I also painted in watercolor. And whenever I got out of school, I pushed that watercolor medium really, I thought, as far as I could go. This was the last real watercolor painting I did. My instructor was Les Miley. He had 2 MFAs, one in watercolor and one in ceramics. I went there to study with him in ceramics. This is actually one of his pieces of pottery, and he taught me a lot about design and color theory in that watercolor class that he taught. And so I did this outside right after I graduated in '97. I went to in 2000. I went to graduate school at Indiana University to study under Bonnie Sklarski and Barry Gelt. The painting program there was all about making things epic. And you can see these 2 paintings are huge. They're massive. I think probably 8 or 9 feet wide. They're huge. And they were constantly pushing me, because I like to make regular paintings for regular sized people, that you can hang in their home, and they're like, no, it needs to be epic. And so I made this big still life of all these crazy objects, like a landscape. This is about 5 feet wide. And they really encouraged me to start looking at art history, studying art history. I became really fascinated with the trompe-l'oeil paintings of William Harnett and Pito. Trompe-l'oeil just means fool the eye. And so these paintings all the objects are painted the size of the actual objects. And so you can't tell whether those are the real objects on that structure or they're painted. And I've always loved illusion. So I made a couple of these drawer paintings. The one on the right was the first one, which just was almost random things in a drawer that you would find, but there's some particular symbolism that was in here. Here we see a skull, money tucked in here, a frog and a chrysalis, which were both symbols of sort of resurrection. But a lot of it was still random. On the left, I challenged myself with painting the crucifixion in a new way. And so here we see this thread forms a red cross. The dollar bill says, in God we trust one. And here's a one. The ace is a one, and the pawn is a one. So there's the 3 and 1, the Trinity. And of course, we have this cross moving in and out of the skull. The glove, a symbol of vanity, violence, mind games, birth, even a sexual innuendo right here. So it has all these kind of components of life kind of whitewashed in a tomb. It's painted around the side too. There's a key that holds the thread on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is it's a note that's tucked in that reads, you can see sort of Father, forgive them. And on the very top is an A, and on the bottom is an O, standing for Alpha and Omega. Also at school, I studied Cubism a lot. I was really fascinated by flattening of space and how to mix that with illusion. And so, you see in this painting on the right here, the cutting of the picture plane in half, and the lining up of things, and where things start to fall into flat planes and also illusion. Here you have in the very back, I don't know if you can recognize that, but that's Michelangelo, Sistine Chapel of God, touching out and reaching at Adam, in the same way that this teapot is reaching out and touching this pot here and filling it up. This was right at the time that my wife at the time found out that she was pregnant. And so here this teapot is giving life to this bundle of joy, right? And this is almost like, this was called nature's order birth. And it's early morning sunlight and almost the skull turning back like the baby coming back to be born. You notice all the skull thread that's been all the way through my work from the very beginning. I studied vanitas, which the Dutch became wealthy. We had the beginning of the middle class. Some of you probably know this. You seem like a pretty well-read bunch. And it was interesting for them because they were Calvinists, right? And they had a lot of guilt about the wealth that they had, but they also had a lot of wealth. And so they were trying to do what the aristocracy was doing and having their portraits painted, or painting all the beautiful things that they had, flowers, vases, lobsters, that demonstrated that wealth, but they also felt guilty about it at the same time. And so they would paint this genre of painting called vanitas emerged, where there would be a portrait, and on the back, the artist would paint a skull, because the portrait was about immortality and beauty and almost vanity. And on the back was a reminder that we're all going to die and rot. And so Peter Claes was one of the famous artists of this time that was painting these paintings that were kind of Calvinist manifestos to remind us of our own mortality. You have candles that are recently sniffed out, old books that are decaying, almost always the skull, signs of wealth. And I did a whole series of these. This is the Warrior's Way. And you can see in here this self-portrait, me at my easel in the reflecting ball, but looking at death as a way to, I was also like studying Buddhism, looking at death as a way to fully live and to let go of attachment. Here you have the Chinese warrior. This is one of those statues that replicate the Chinese warriors that were dug up about immortality, right? And but then there's these weird cubist ideas. You see this line in the finger that lines up with a line there. This line lines up with a line there. And this line lines up with a line there. When you line those lines up, it flattens the space. And so that's done intentionally. Giorgio Morandi one of my favorite artists of all times. I loved how he could take just bottles and make them like a spiritual experience. This like really opened me up. And when you start to think about the stones, they really stem from Giorgio Morandi, because he took things that were junk, that like just didn't mean anything, and put them together in a way where they became something epic or supernatural or an altar of some sort. And there was this visual rhythm of them. And so I did a whole series of paintings. Here's my 2 Trinity paintings. It's the exact same composition with different lighting and how they relate differently, but there's this beautiful harmony between those 3 objects and the space in between them. Daniel Sprick, I'll tell you, he's probably one of the greatest living realist artists in the world. If you ever go to Denver, there's a gallery that shows him there. He's from Denver. There's some in the Denver Art Museum. Maybe you've seen him. When I was a boy in Chattanooga, the Hunter Museum there, they had a big Daniel Sprick painting, and I saw it. And it was the first time I'd seen anybody paint realistically like that, contemporarily. And it mesmerized me. And it was one of the things that made me want to be an artist. And just the way this tactile understanding of fabric. And also you see how almost photographically he's blurred out the background to make this look more real. And I started to do that. And instead of denying the existence of photography, I started utilizing some of the tools of photography to do that in my own work. There's always these things that are sort of floating or fading away. And it seems like something important has happened, something mystical. And I've tried to figure out a way to capture that. This is the first time you'll see the butterflies show up in my work. Again, you saw the chrysalis and the frog, which are symbols of resurrection. And here the butterfly is also a symbol of that resurrection because of its transformation from a caterpillar into a new form. Those of you in Indianapolis are familiar with Flannery Buchanan funeral homes. This is Bruce Buchanan commissioned this painting as an anniversary gift for him and his wife. And it was a piece of pottery that his father had brought home that he wanted as part of this. And this was the china that they had drank their toast at their wedding. And you can see this little butterfly in the pottery right here, engraved in the pottery. And then I replicated it with a live one. So sort of a past and future coming together. And I'll just tell you, sometimes people think that I just love painting, like painting is a lot of fun. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's hard work and it's maddening. There's a vision that I have that I want to create, and there's a lot of work and difficulty to get there. The painting of that crystal there was horrible. I mean, it was really, talk about a mind-boggling puzzle. I'd have to take a little square of paper and eliminate everything out of the photograph except that tiny little square, and do the same over there so that I could just trace those, because really it is painting all these tiny little shapes of color right next to each other. And you have to really, really strongly focus in order to do that correctly. Yeah, it's not easy and not fun, but I think it's what makes the image powerful. In this still life here, you see, I've got an arrow pointing, you see the first time stones show up. And these were those cheap little Target stones you get in a bag. And they were just around the house. And I thought, oh, I'll put this in the still life. Seems sort of meditative, contemplative. And so this is where we see that at the very beginning. I teach a contemporary art class, and one of my favorite artists to show students is Andy Goldsworthy. And there's a great documentary by him. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It gives me chills every time I watch it. So big recommendation for him. But he does these environmental sculpture where he collects objects and puts them together and creates these art forms that just exist for a short period of time and then they disappear. And he photographs them or videos them. And so you can see on my painting on the right, this bird's nest, I collect these things that I think are beautiful and then reassembling them. And so the stones almost reflect back the bird's nest relationship. Then I discovered Alan McGee, and Alan McGee is he really is these paintings. He is just a kind, beautiful, wonderful soul from Maine, and just a kind, he's just, I sent him a message once about a technical question about his work, and he just called me up. This was before cell phones and caller ID. And I had a conversation with him. My wife just handed me the phone and I had a conversation with him for like 5 or 10 minutes before I realized it was him, because I never imagined in a million years he would call me. But these are monumental paintings of stones and they had a spirit to them. And when I saw them in person, it was back in 2006, Forum Gallery, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what painting really can be. You know, for the cost of a house, you can own one of these too. This is very affordable. But I mean, they are just epic. They're an epic experience and they're so soft and so beautiful and so serene. And he's a soft, kind man like that. Unfortunately, I'm a little edgier and grittier and I don't live in Maine and we don't have those. The stones here are not the same as Maine stones. They're like, I don't know, they're more Midwestern. If you will. So I get asked this a lot, why I paint stones, and ask people how old the average garden stone is. And the answer is somewhere between 13 million and 2 billion years old. That's older than, of course, all of human life, but older than the dinosaurs as well. And so these are really, they have a history of all of humanity, but all of really life as we know it here on this planet. And so when I paint them, I'm starting to I'm trying to investigate what they know. I'm trying to listen to them. I know that sounds crazy, but anybody that spends the thousands of hours as I have painting these rocks from all over the world, these are the things you think about. Tools have been made from stones for 3.5 million years. Some of the greatest architecture of all times are just piles of stones. Primitive people would, anytime somebody died or something important would happen, they would stack stones there. And of course, the pyramids of Giza, probably the most famous pile of stones we have anywhere. And then we have contemporary stones that we put up. And we have sacred stones, ancient sacred stones, and then contemporary sacred stones. And so stones are like you can't really separate stones from humanity. In fact, it was interesting. I had someone come up to me that knew my spiritual background and said, you know, we think of Jesus as a carpenter, but there really isn't a lot of wood in the Middle East. It's a desert. And they think that it's probably a misinterpretation because Jesus talks about stones a lot. And in fact, names Peter a rock, right? He names Peter a stone. And he uses stone metaphors a lot, but not wood metaphors. And so they think that that probably is a misinterpretation that Jesus was more like a stonemason than he was a carpenter as we think of it. Now here's where it's going to get really interesting. So pigment, the thing that makes paint, is made from crushed stones. So I'm painting stones with stones, right? The stones are then mixed with linseed oil to form oil paint. And so we take stones and we crush them and we make oil paint. And then I make a painting of stones with the stones. And so in this strange way, the stones equal the stones. And this is Duchamp's ready-made. And so the stones are like ready-made stones. I'm just putting them in a new context. I'm rearranging them in a different way, in the way Duchamp rearranged the bicycle wheel and chair. So this is my first painting that was just rocks. And that's a picture of my daughter. I went down to Fall Creek here in Indianapolis, and she liked to throw rocks in the creek. And I brought my camera to take pictures of her throwing rocks in the creek like a good dad. And after 4 or 5 photographs of her, I just started taking pictures of rocks. And whenever I uploaded all that on my computer, I was like, there's something really interesting about this. I think I'll paint this. And this was the painting that started it all. Of all the paintings that I've ever painted, this one has probably won more awards than any other. I don't think it's my best painting, but it has definitely won the more awards. By the way, this little girl is now a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate. Bonnie mentioned the exhibition at the airport. This big monster is 8 feet long. Yeah, I did this over my sabbatical. Just hundreds and hundreds of hours staring. It now is in the art suite. That's part of Johnson Center for Fine Arts. That's where it's temporarily housed. Yeah. You remember the trompe l'oeil from earlier. Here you see the sort of the stones. All of this is painted, including the side. So you see these stones kind of peeking out over the top. And one of the strange things that happened is that as I started painting stones, most of the stones were things that I found, but then people started bringing me stones wherever they went. They're like, hey, I found these stones and I thought of you here. I would like, so I have this collection of stones that really represent friendships from people and places all over the world. And so it's like a global community of stones that would never exist together in the same place that are existing together in my paintings. That also represents the connections I have with human beings from all over. I've done a whole series of small paintings. These are 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. I like these because they're quicker, and I can work out kind of complex ideas and play with different things in a short way. And they're also more affordable for regular old people to own original art. And that's really important to me. You'll see some of these green stones like this. Bonnie, you know Doug Grant. He is a stone, and you'll find these people that are obsessed with stones that have been collecting stones for like 20 years. They have no idea what to do with them. They have huge tubs of them in their garage. Their significant other thinks they're crazy. And they find me and they're like, hey, I have all these stones I'd like to show you. Doug is one of those people who's been going up to Lake Michigan and hunting stones, particularly these green and blue stones that you find in Lake Michigan. They're actually a product of industrial waste that was pumped in the 50s into Lake Michigan that mixed with the minerals in Lake Michigan to form these very weird stones, and people collect them. They're super collectible. They turn them into jewelry, and it's a product of industrial waste, which is really beautiful, the way God and Mother Nature can take things that are pollutants and turn them into something beautiful. So he has a huge collection of these green and blue stones. And so this painting on the right is from a series of photographs. I just go down there and I do a photo shoot of all of his rocks and made this painting for it. This painting on the left is much more narrative driven and closely related to my own spirituality, spiritual beliefs. You see, obviously, the bird's nest representing birth. And this window between the two is life. And then the black background, I don't know if you can see the pattern of skulls hidden in there. And so this is death. So you have birth, the window is life, and then the outside is death. And then you have these three stones, which represent the Trinity, that stands outside of all of those things, above them, right? It's almost like the only thing that's real in the picture. So, yeah. It's a couple of my latest paintings. On the right is the 8.5 by 8.5. I thought I was just going to paint that 8.5 by 8.5, and that was it. And there was just so much information in it. There was so much that I was learning. And there was also stuff I couldn't capture at the small size. So I made the big one. The big one's 4 foot square, I believe. I love that they have a different kind of hue range, and it's like I'm seeing things differently each time. I don't know that one's better than the other. They're just different. They've got a different energy and spirit, and especially when something's tiny, it feels much more intimate, and something's big, it's much more powerful. And this is part of the real recent work that I've been doing, combining collage and heavy impasto, the very thick paint, even spray paint, non-traditional material. The one on the right has journaling on it. And then the painting, the butterfly is painted on there, trompe l'oeil, to look like it's just sort of landed on the surface. And I don't know, I painted these during COVID times, the beginning of COVID times. And there was something about being at home with 5 children and their frustration and my frustration and sort of the heaviness of it all. Like it really lent me to making this other kind of work that has kind of a stillness and violence combined together, abstract and real, and sort of a floating in and out of reality. Now, you will see in here, this one has, all this has imagery and pictures and collage and stuff. Most of it is hidden. There's some little images of my wife in here. You'll see this is actually from the photograph that was the source photo for a painting that you'll see in the portrait session. So this is a painting portrait of my wife, and she was a huge David Bowie fan. And when David Bowie died, she painted this lightning on her eye, and did a photo shoot of herself as kind of a memorial. And I was so struck by the image, I asked her if I could use it and combine it with this collage, and it really trying to capture her personality in an image. On the left is her again, a very different kind of painting, and but still playing with transparency and illusion and flat plane. And on the right is a commission portrait. And I don't know if you're familiar with Kehinde Wilde, but he was the artist that painted Obama's presidential portrait. And I had seen an exhibition of his 10 or 15 years ago, and they, as portraits, they always fascinated me. I love the sort of the flat pattern combined with realism and like the play in between those things. And you see that was all the way present in my graduate school work. So in both of these portraits, I'm doing that. I still do, like, narrative is still important to me. You see, like, this slideshow, like a lot of things I care about, and I flip-flop between one thing and another. On the left is a charcoal drawing. It's a triple self-portrait. There's three faces of myself, and the butterflies kind of coming out of that. Sort of a burning away of anger and sadness, and bringing about hope. And my wife in the background, sort of representing maybe like the phoenix rising out of the ashes, or an angel, some kind of spirit leading us forward. And then this portrait right here, my wife was very pregnant with our last child at this point, and you can't see her belly here, but and of course this has got all this illusion, like she's floating in the clouds like a goddess, right? And the flowers in her hair and the horns and all of the stuff on the makeup and all that's fantastic. But in the ball, you see the illusion, like that this really is an illusion. You can see this little skull. This is the green screen that I shot this on so I can put the clouds in. And so you see the artifice of the clouds on the floor. And there's a little tiny portrait of me with my phone taking your picture in there. So in a strange way, it's like a little family portrait, and the artifice of the studio in the midst of something that is at first glance very like, like the old ways of the goddess being shown. And lastly, one of the compliments I receive a lot is that, oh, your paintings are so good, they look just like a photograph. And I know people are really well-meaning in what they're saying. What they're trying to say is they think of gold photographs as a kind of a gold standard for realism. And this may sound like I'm being a conceited jerk, but I'm really not, because photography is a different aesthetic than painting. And the photographs don't look like the paintings, because I know, because I took the photographs. And if they look the same, I would save myself a lot of time and energy, and I would just show the photographs. So here you have these three forms, the original photograph on the left. I altered that photograph in Photoshop to get to this place. And then when I'm painting, I'm changing the photograph to make it better. You can see this poor stone right here looks like a potato. And I thought, good God, I can't have the focal point of this whole painting be a potato. And so I swapped it out. I swapped out, the size is the same, but I used some of the markings of another stone I had to create this sort of central stone. And I don't know how you feel, but I think that the finished painting is an improvement over the original photograph, which seems very meh. Because Indiana, this is in Murat Park, which is a place that my kids go, my family goes in the summer, and we swim in the creek and hunt crayfish, and I take photographs of rocks while we're there. And the stones are kind of much like many of the people of Indiana, like hardworking industrial stones, but they're not very glamorous. And so they need some retouching to make them as beautiful as they can be. So anyway, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll open up for any questions anybody may have. Feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute yourself, and I'm happy to.
I really love the stones.
Oh,
I collect stones. I've collected stones all my life. My husband said one of these days I'm going to get arrested because I take stones where I shouldn't be taking stones. But I haven't done that in a long, long time. If that is the case, I will buy them from somebody. But I do have stones from going way, way back. So I think they're beautiful.
yeah.
And I use them around the house, around my garden. And I thought that they're part of life.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something very grounding about the energy of the stones when you just hold them in your hands. And we had a front flower bed with stones in it instead of mulch. And every one of my kids like teethed on those stones. They just pick them up and chew on them. And of course, with stones around the flower, we have geodes. I have a cabin down south, and there's these creeks with geodes, and just hundreds of geodes in our house, around our house. And there's something really beautiful about that energy. Yeah, and I was like you. I started collecting stones when I was a little bitty kid. Yeah, Jean, you had a question?
Yeah, well, I'm a stone collector also, but I was curious. You were talking in that last little segment about photographing the stones and then basically enhancing them. I'll put it that way. Do you ever like put them in water? Because often that can bring out their natural colors too, and so forth.
Yes, and I've done some paintings where some stones are in water and some stones are out. I've done a few of those. One of the things I think that works really well is taking a little bit of baby oil or olive oil and just rubbing it on it, because the water will dry, especially when you got light
True.
on it. And so
True.
putting a little bit of baby oil will keep them kind of in that wet. I don't want it to. The water makes it reflective, make the light bounce off of it, and makes it too shiny and too artificial. So I don't want it like that, but I do like it where it's got the color pops a little more.
Well, and I was thinking with that, because I do that with my young 6-year-old grandson, because he loves to collect rocks, and then we put them in water to see what their color is, watch them change color basically. And yeah, I like the idea of the baby oil, because like you said, they do dry out and then they just look blah. So
right. Yeah. And my friend Doug, the one who has all the blue and green stones, he has this big, huge glass container, and he has all those blue and green stones immersed in water in his house so that he can see them in that sort of wet state. And I have a big fish tank, like a 80-gallon fish tank that has stones in it too. So yeah, we're on the same wavelength there. Anybody else?
So this is going to probably sound silly, but I draw just a little bit. And one of the things that I find is I can't tell when it's done. And so I'm watching you paint. And I thought, first of all, how do you know when it's done? And then secondly, how can you bear to sell something that you put so many hours and so much of your own life and symbolism into?
Oh, what a great question, Bonnie. Actually, that's the same question that was asked to me in my graduate thesis panel. Like, how do you know when it's done? So for me, I really wish I could stop earlier, because I could make a lot more money. Because a lot of times, especially in the age of photography, people like some things that are maybe a little more painterly, but I can only make the work that I make that's authentically me. And I've just found that there's a degree of finish that I'm okay with. That it's like the vision in my head has a certain degree of clarity, and until I reach that, I'm not satisfied. Now, I'll also tell you that these paintings, they take a long time. And at some point, I'm just really irritated with it. I'm just like, I really just want this to be done. And I'm ready to move on to the next thing. I mean, I teach, I paint, I've got coaching, I've got a million children. And so it takes a long time to work on a thing. And I'm like done. I'm like done looking at it. I'm done studying it. I'm ready to move on to the next idea. And I can't have like a whole bunch of stuff started at the same time. I have just one thing until I'm done with it. And those big paintings take so long. Really takes a lot of discipline to stay true to that vision. And that leads to the second question. Whenever I go to sell it, I am ready. I am just like, ooh, I have studied you back, front, center. Each one of the paintings have maybe 3 layers of paint on it. And so I've like really studied and studied and studied all the little parts. So the painting may only have, say, 120 hours worth of work in it, but I can't do it. I can't do that 8 hours a day. It would be like reading an encyclopedia for 8 hours. Your mind would just lock up. And so I'm doing these at like 3-hour stints at a time to get that. And by the time I'm done, I feel like I've learned everything that I need to know from it. And I live in one of these old 4-square houses, and there's just windows everywhere. There's just not space for things. And so I love that somebody feels such a deep connection with my work that they're willing to give me their money, their time, their energy, because they love this thing and they want to cherish it as something really important in their home. And so I don't feel sad at all about it. I also think that it's alchemy. Alchemy is that changing a stone into like the powder, into the paint, into the painting again. And alchemy is also taking worthless things and turning them into expensive things. And so literally I'm turning ground up rocks into gold, which was what Merlin was always trying to do, right? And so I love that idea. We get a couple of questions in there. How much does a small 8-inch painting cost? So frame, they're $1,250, the small paintings. And I tell people, so sometimes the price is like, oh God, that's a lot of money. But the way I paint these things, they're going to be around for 500 years unchanged. And it's not like a poster, it's not like a print. And I try to paint it with as much care and quality that it's something like your great grandchildren will enjoy versus like the TV, which is 10 years from now, is not going to be around, or your car or anything else, even furniture wears out. So you're buying something that's kind of like an heirloom. The portraits, the like 18 by 24 are like $3,500 framed, which I don't sell through a gallery. I just sell direct to people. I have a gallery in Denver that sells my work along with Daniel Sprick and some of those other people, but most of my work I sell directly because the gallery takes 50% of everything you sell. And so when I sell an $8,000 painting and they take $4,000 of it, it's like, so I would rather keep the price a little bit lower and be able to sell directly to people. And that's worked for me. It's harder to sell the big ones though, because I don't know people that are rich and have homes that are that big. So sometimes I'll have gallery shows to try to sell the big ones. Yeah. The other question, wow, realism versus impressionism or other stuff, it's just the way I'm wired up. If you look at your signature, and some people's signature are very controlled, and some people it's like chicken scratch. Like, why sign things that way? I don't know. It's just it's the pulse of who you are. And I have wanted to paint. I've done master copies of Impressionist paintings, or like I've done several master copies of Van Gogh paintings, like heavy impasto. I can do that, but that it's false. It's a pretense of something that I'm not. It's somebody else's voice, not my own. Yeah.
So I do have one other question, kind of tagging on to what Bonnie was talking about, of knowing when to stop. In one of your slides, you were talking, you had a smaller painting that you initially created. I'm assuming figuring that would be enough of that particular collection, but then once done, you decided there was more to express.
Yeah.
So how often does that happen? And what is what is your take on that, I guess?
Yeah. So as I said, most of the time I paint a painting and then I'm like done looking at it. I'm like, poof, I'm done with that. But there's something about that painting that developed unfinished, and that there was more information. There was more something for me to learn. And here's really how I decide to start the painting. I didn't really talk about this process. So I take lots of photographs and I move things around, and I take photographs of rocks in nature. I move things around in nature. I take rocks at home and I set things up and I take photographs of that. Lots and lots and lots of photographs. And I will put them on the computer and I'll look at them and I'll just scan them. I'm like, no. And occasionally I'll hit them. I'm like, maybe. And I'll put this in another pile. And I'll have this other pile and I'll look through this and I weed things down. And it is a small percentage, like, a half of 1% makes it to a place where I'm starting to edit it in Photoshop, manipulate the color and saturation. And then I look at it and I let it sit and I look at it and I'm like, is this something that if I saw that image and I'm like, ooh, that's arresting, that's powerful, there's something there to it. And if there's not, I don't touch it, because I don't want to stare at something that doesn't have some kind of power to it for 40 hours or more. And most of the time after I do the study, I've gotten everything I want out of the image. There's something that I've been guided to see, to understand, to work through in the image. I don't even know exactly what that is. And usually the small study will do it. And then very occasionally, a small percentage of the time, I'm led to make a bigger version of that because I don't feel like I don't feel done with it. Like there's something I don't understand or I haven't figured out. I feel compelled. And that's that compelling to paint the image. That's the only reason I paint something.
So that compunction actually determines maybe the size ultimately that you go with.
Yeah. And the big paintings are super impractical. They're just hauling them around and framing them. And then you try to sell the thing because it's giant and it's expensive. And I make less money out of the big paintings, just the time it takes to paint the big paintings. So they're super impractical, but sometimes I feel driven that it's important to make the big painting. Yeah, because it's a different tool, like same painting tools, but like the big paintings I'll paint even with a palette knife in places, and it's realism, but it's like a real different touch than on the small painting. They're much more physical. They're just different. It's a different process even.
Wow.
Any other questions?
I have a quick
Sorry.
question. So what do you like about teaching painting?
Well, I love that students greatly underestimate their capacity. I mean, I think that, and it makes me look like a rock star. I like that, pun intended. And because they don't have any real knowledge about what they're capable of. And I've been able to break down painting very systematically, and where it's like a recipe, like somebody saying, I have no idea how to cook. And like, it seems like wizardry or some mystic thing over there. And you're like, oh no, you follow the recipe, you crack the eggs, you put the flour in, you stir it up, you pour it in a bowl. If you do all these steps, you'll end up with a cake. Ooh, it's magical, right? And so I love them getting to realize the potential in themselves that they didn't know was possible. And that's part of what I love in kind of the coaching, spiritual coaching stuff that I do too. Yeah, because that opens them up that they're, well, I didn't think I was capable of this and this happened. Well, what are other things do I have limits on myself that I haven't reached my potential? Yeah.
I think that's a great perspective. And I would just say that I have two great nephews, 10 and 6, and their art is just amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, good school, so maybe they've got a good teacher, which I hope, but they also just seem to have this love of shows up in paintings. And so it's just so much fun. I get photos or texts of their pictures lots.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of my kids have artistic ability. one of them I think is going to go on further. The other one are just, they're interested in all kinds of other things. One of them, like, he's really serious about it. He doesn't want a lot of instruction from me though. He's going to do it on his own. I know when I was a kid, I would have died if I had a parent that could like teach me. He's like, no, I want to do it on my own. I'm like, okay. But yeah, he's one of the younger kids, and he's always been as good as his older siblings, even though he was a whole bunch of years younger. Yeah.
So do you teach, I mean, what exactly do you teach? Is it portrait painting? Is it abstract, or do you go through a series like a survey of art types of art and painting and whatnot, so that a person might find out that, oh, I'm good at this, but I'm not so interested in that, you know?
Yeah, Marian, that's a great question. And I've tried a lot of different things. I have, most of my students are non-art majors that like poke in for a little bit of painting, like a painting is exploration. There's no prerequisites, so they don't know anything about drawing or color theory or anything. It's like teaching somebody who doesn't know how to weld how to build a steel ship. It's like really, it's
Wow.
complicated in one semester. But I've decided that my greatest gift to my students is to be able to teach them how to really represent the reality that they experience realistically, because that's what I'm really good at. There was a time where I gave them kind of like a buffet of a lot of different things, and they felt very lost because it's not my language and I'm not really good at that. And it was incongruent. I also think that for my majors, that I think it's very, very easy. It's much easier for someone that can paint representationally to start exploring abstraction or other styles. But it's hard if they're exploring that to learn representational painting if they don't have instruction. So I think it's much easier to go this way. And really, if you look at Picasso and Braque and all the famous abstract painters, Cezanne, they learned how to draw representationally first. They drew from the model. They learned anatomy. They learned all that stuff before they started breaking the figure apart. And so I teach that way. And I think if nothing else, my students can make a living painting portraits at the end of it. So painting one, we just learned how to do simple gradations. They paint a black and white sphere. They learn some color theory and color mixtures, and then they create a collage out of stuff they've cut out of magazines or done digitally, and then they replicate that in painting, matching the colors and the textures in the painting. So that's painting one. Painting two, they create their own still life and photograph it, learn how to compose, and then they make a large, they do some master copies of other still lifes, and then they make a large painting from that still life. Painting three is focused on portraiture, and painting four is observational painting, which usually combines both still life and portraiture. And there's other little exercises in there, but that's the general gist of it, to prepare them for graduate work or to be able to make their living selling the work. So yeah.
Sounds interesting. Thank you.
I don't know that that's the right way to do it. It's just, that's who I am. So I just decided to just kind of do me in my life instead of trying to do a whole bunch of other people. Yeah.
That's why you're successful.
No, thanks. Thanks.
Really, a person's, being themselves and doing what they know how to do and what they feel about is always much better, whether it's in writing or painting or whatever.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that my process for painting representationally is not the only process. I don't think it's the right one. It's just the one I found that's working for me now. And even that's evolved. I do different things. And so I just try to teach what I think knows best for me, and knowing that I tell students there's a lot of other teachers and a lot of other ways. I don't have the monopoly. This isn't the right way, but I have to tell you some way, or otherwise you don't have any methodology to get to where you want to go. Yeah. Dodie said, are you still doing any ceramics? What's your style with clay? I do a little bit, mostly in my teaching and demonstration and stuff. I'm a wheel thrown potter. And so, yeah, I really like to make functional pottery, but also very large platters that are carved and hanging on the wall. So like paintings. Yeah. I know you guys are, we've keeping you late. Feel free if you need to go, you can head out. Yeah. Anybody
Do you
else?
sell platters? I mean, do you sell things like your functional ceramic? Because I would find that really nice. If I don't have enough wall space, at least I could
Yeah.
maybe buy a platter.
Yeah. In terms of a business, selling ceramics is way harder to make a living than selling paintings. Yeah. I mean, so think about the most exquisite functional pot you could, like a beautiful teapot. This person spent years perfecting this, like $500 would feel like a stretch, but I could sell a little painting for $1,200, $1,250, right? And so I found that I was a potter, like that's part of what I did between undergrad and grad school is I opened my own ceramic studio. It's very hard to make a living, making bowls and plates and stuff. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, just like it does for a painting, but people's ideas about what ceramics should cost versus what a painting should cost, because a painting is an art object and a ceramics has a functional feel to it. Now, I notice if I have a plate that's sitting flat, I can sell for, I don't know, maybe $100 or $200. But if I put it on the wall, I can sell it for $500 or $600. So when it becomes non-functional, it's worth more than if it's functional. It doesn't make any sense, but it is something in our psychology is like that. But I do like, I'm a designer, and so I do like designing. A big, huge platter is like a big canvas, a big circular canvas I can carve, and clay's so amazing because you can press stuff into it, and it's quicker in some ways to get to the end result. So yeah, I do sell some of it. Most of the stuff, I don't make a ton of it. So a lot of it I give as gifts to people. One of my students just got married and I officiated it earlier this week. And of course they get a platter for their wedding present. And so having gallery connections or selling at fairs and stuff, like I know people do that. I just don't have the time to dedicate to doing that, because if I do that, I don't have time to make work. And so, yeah, that's the long answer to a short question.
So there's nothing on your website with ceramic pieces or anything? Okay.
No.
That's fine. And also break, maybe that's the reason people don't want to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is a kind of temporariness of it. And we have machines that do it so well. So yeah.
But not your touch.
That's right. It's not. And I really try to tell students to not have a machine aesthetic. And in pottery, they really do. They try to make things like they bought, like the pottery that they bought at Target, and I'm like, why are you trying to compete with a machine? You are not going to win this. The cost of materials is just going to, take all your profit margin. And so what's your unique voice? What's the value in your humanness? And that's part of why I talk about like my paintings versus photography, because they feel different. Like, especially if you see them in person. Seeing them on a screen, it looks more similar, but in person, they have a kind of tactile quality and they have a kind of life of their own that's different than what photographs do. I love photographs. I have photographs in my house, but they're just not the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, seeing what you can do for stones from a photograph to a painting makes me rethink portraits.
Yeah.
I'd love to see you do that for me, David.
Yeah. Well, here's one of the funny things is that people think that they want, like, even as a realist painter, people think that they want reality, but they don't really want, people don't like reality. Even reality TV is not reality. It's got the scripted component because reality is boring. We got reality 24/7. We don't need more reality. People want something that's like an extraordinary moment in reality where you're like, that was magical. And so I try to give people a magical moment that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And so it's an idealized experience. I think everybody wants that. Everybody wants to look their best or to
Younger.
Yeah, exactly, right?
You can do a portrait painting and just make the person look 10 years younger.
That's right, of course.
They'll
Of course
love
you
you.
would. Of course you would. Everybody looks like they would on their very, very best day when they're super well rested and they're just happy as a clam and everything's going right in the world. Yeah, I think that's how people want to experience themselves. Yeah.
Well, I think you guys can see why I so enjoyed having David as a colleague, because not only does he have an amazing talent with art, but he is so bright, so thoughtful, and so interesting to talk to. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this, and I'll probably reach out to you and ask for your opinion as Susan and I are trying to put together programs for the year.
Okay,
So,
great.
Thank you. That
Yeah,
was
thank you
wonderful.
all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It
Take
was
care,
great.
ladies.
Thank you.